Welcome to the Wealth Stream Podcast. The team at Hightower Great Lakes share their insights and passions for empowering their clients to live their best life. In this energetic podcast, we will take you on a journey to help you navigate your financial future, overcome life's challenges to reach your financial goals, and find the financial clarity you've been searching for. Let's explore the downstream impact of your wealth and what it means to you, your family, and your community to live greater.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Stream Podcast with Tim Scannell. Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm good. About yourself?
Doing fantastic. I heard you had a wonderful weekend. What'd you do?
I did. My wife Nancy and I, we drove up to Milwaukee. It's just a couple-hour drive, and we're able to spend a day with my brand new grandson, Charlie.
Oh,
it was a blast.
Yeah, a brand new grandson. So how many grandkids do you have?
So I have Eileen. She's 3.5, and then her little brother, Charlie. So I have 2 grandchildren. And I tell you what, everyone always told me it would be great, but it's even better than I ever thought. It's a blast.
Oh, man, that is fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
You bet. You know, that ties in incredibly well with what we're talking about today. I know we prepped the audience. We're talking about charitable giving and philanthropy today, and how it can be used to help generational planning and kind of leaving a legacy.
Exactly. So what we try to do when we work with clients, we obviously spend a lot of time and energy helping them prepare their wealth, their assets, ultimately to be transferred to the next generation. But today I really wanted to focus on philanthropy as a way to help prepare the next generation to receive the wealth, to receive it. I look at it as receiving it in a way that enhances their life, helps them out as opposed to hurts them. But also beyond your beneficiaries, your heirs, oftentimes our clients have very specific charities they want to benefit. And we also have processes that we help them use to prepare the charities to, when they get the gifts and the donations, to use those in a way that kind of reflects their values. And kind of a third benefit of using philanthropy is that it's a way that our clients, people can pass knowledge, experience, create a legacy with the next generation. One of my passions is entrepreneurship, and I sincerely think that when people pass on, when they pass on and when they die, if they haven't passed their knowledge, their experience, how they created the business, how they created the wealth, I just think it's a missed opportunity to pass on their legacy to the next generation. And so philanthropy is just one of those tools that we use to do that.
Got it. That makes perfect sense.
I think one of the things that we focus on that might be a little different from other advisors is, and I mentioned it, I think, in the last podcast, but really our definition of wealth. So a lot of times people will come meet with us and we help them analyze the traditional sense of wealth, like cash and stocks and bonds, real estate, income, cash flow. But in addition to those traditional assets that you would find in your balance sheet, we think of wealth including your family name, your legacy. All you have to do is read the paper or look in the internet and you see how your family brand can be really harmed. There's a lot of information out there about you. So we focus on helping clients kind of preserve and protect and pass on some of that knowledge and information to protect the name. And knowledge is a big part of it. But also, most of our clients we work with have a great deal of, we call it donor intent, but really it's a feeling that they want to give back. They want to support the community. They want to support the charities that have really supported them. So our definition of wealth as a starting point, I think is just a broader definition than maybe other advisors might use.
And I know that with passing on wealth to a charity or a community outreach program or whatever, there's so many different ways to do a ton of good with the funds that you're passing. But I think a lot of people don't realize that they can actually do a lot of good for their own family by passing that to a charity, because there's tax issues, there's all sorts of different things that we just don't know about, all the ins and outs and the different laws and rules and regulations that the government puts in place and the state puts in place. We just don't know them all. So how do you help your clients kind of walk through that so their giving to a charity can actually also help their family?
Exactly. So in our formal processes, we add things you can do, things clients can do to help with that. So in the beginning, we focus a lot of energy on preparing your assets for transfer. We work with your CPAs and your attorneys and your trust officers, other advisors you might be working with. We prepare the analysis of the assets, liabilities. We put together the plans. We help you with communication processes for your family. But where we add that next step is what we call preparing for what I think is a gap in the planning process, which is preparing your family for receiving the wealth. And, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Eric, but there's a kind of a Norman Rockwell painting of a father and son. And I had read that it initially was on an annual report for a trust company in the 70s. But if you haven't seen it, you can visualize it's a photo or a painting of a father on the left, and he's sitting in a chair, and he's pulling documents out of an old lockbox, where people used to store things. Mm-hmm. And then you have the son sitting across from him, just wide-eyed and confused because the father is holding a stock certificate, and he's trying to explain passing on information. And really, it's a very one-way photo. It's a very one-way painting. And I think that oftentimes that's the problem is you're passing the information to them, but we like to use philanthropy in particular as a way to make it more collaborative and sharing and getting information from the next generation.
Wow, that's fantastic. Including your children or even your grandchildren in your giving of not only finances, but time to different charities or different things that are near and dear to your heart. What an opportunity to train them in kind of the right thing to do or how you can impact your community and make it about somebody else and not just yourself.
Exactly, because when you read about why transfers of wealth fail, if you read statistics about family-owned businesses only survive 20% of the time into the third generation, typically the cause is lack of communication and lack of trust between the parents, the grandparents, and then the children. And so communication is a key part of it, and philanthropy as a tool is all based on communication. So, for example, one of the things that philanthropy does is it really allows you to train the kids, train the next generation, whether it's your children or grandchildren, mm-hmm. in the use of money. This past weekend when I was up in Milwaukee, obviously Charlie's too young, even Eileen, who's 3.5, is too young. But we can start talking about things like 529 accounts or just giving that they do at their local church, or opportunities now that Eileen's in kindergarten or pre-K to participate in some of the holiday events where they're donating turkeys and mm-hmm. going on to soup kitchens and things like that. So sometimes it's just taking advantage of opportunities and really using it as a way to train and learn and teach them about money.
I'm really surprised that Eileen's not interested in 529 plans.
I guess that's a little too much, but I can guarantee their parents are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Eileen's more interested in what the money does and the candy it can buy or the whatever it can buy. And so that'll be fun to train her in the right way. And that's her parents' job. And good luck with that, because we've all been through that, or a lot of us have been through that. Talk to me a little bit about how this communication works. I know you and I have spoken about multi-generational family meetings. You're going to tell us a little bit about that process at some point, right? I'm kind of waiting for that podcast. I'm kind of excited.
Yes. The next podcast will focus specifically on multi-generational family meetings and a process that we have for designing and creating and implementing and managing those meetings. Philanthropy tools are really something that can become part of that. I'll just give you an example. I have one family, grandparents, they actually work in the business with the children. So there's a lot of connection there. There's a lot of communication, a lot of transfer of knowledge between them. But in order to create some of that transfer of knowledge between the grandparents and the grandchildren, they set up a donor advised fund, and they contributed $10,000 in this example. And they said, there's 5 grandchildren, and each of the 5 grandchildren had the opportunity to select a charity that they could then give $2,000 to.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but what happens is you're requiring, one of the requirements then is that each of the grandchildren had to go and not just say, I want to give it to this charity, but they had to actually talk to the charity. They had to identify things like, what percentage of contributions actually go to the end user, mm-hmm. To the charity. So it really made them kind of research, because what this grandfather had said to me was, we're not, and this really stuck with me, we're not trying to prepare them to respect a dollar because they respect a dollar. We're trying to prepare them to respect, $500,000 because that's what's going to plop in their lap at some point in the future. And you want to make sure that they respect money, they understand money. And this is one of the tools that they used to do that.
That's great. And using philanthropy as a tool for your overall financial plan is beautiful because it has so many benefits. But I want us to take a step back just for a moment. That's a beautiful picture that you painted, that the 5 grandchildren, they had to do some research. I know there's tools online. I can't think of the website at right this moment. Hopefully we can find it and put a link in the podcast. But I know there's a tool online that actually helps you to take a look at a charity and see what percentage of your donation goes directly to the people in need or the reason for the charity existing. So we have those tools. We'll put a link in the podcast for that. Also, the fact that they are finding a charity that would be near and dear to them, I think that's so important that every family member understands that if your grandparents or your parents give to a charity, you need to ask the question why.
Yeah, so that's really important. I think that in this case, we'll just stick with the same example of the grandparents, but their giving historically was all built around their family values as a couple. This gave them the opportunity to pass some of those values, pass some of that history knowledge to the grandkids. But it also gave the grandparents a lot of insight into the grandchildren in terms of really what's important to them, what kind of values they have, because they're different. They're similar in a lot of ways, but very different in others. So it was very much a two-way conversation that created a lot of collaboration, a lot of strength in the connection between them all. They had fun doing it. It just in general was a great learning experience in the building of this family unit, I thought.
Did the grandparents share with you, or did they have the opportunity to share with you kind of how they came back together and discussed it, or kind of the level of accountability that these grandkids had?
Yeah, I'll say that the accountability piece is really key because that's one of the lessons I think that this really can teach. In this case, what they learned was that some of the kids were just more accountable than others, right? And that's how it is. I have 5 children. They're the same way. And I don't mean accountable in the sense that they just didn't follow through, but you have different interests. Some people are much more numbers orientated. Some people are much more emotional. They're just different styles of communication. And then a couple were super busy in college, and they just didn't have the time to do it. So it wasn't I wouldn't say it was a 100% complete success, but I thought in general it went really, really well. But also it created kind of a stepping stone for the next year and the year after that. And it just kind of builds this pattern of giving, pattern of respect for money, and just an opportunity to just teach and pass on your legacy and knowledge each year.
What a great picture to be able to take a look at. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to that kind of data and things, and thinking of the 5 kids or 5 grandchildren in this picture, and the age gaps between them would definitely play a part in what they thought, how much effort they put in necessarily, or how emotionally tied they could be to a charity, just because of their experiences, their stage in life. Like you said, some people in college, some people, working full time. That has to be, the age issue must be pretty interesting to take a look at. Yeah.
So we have kind of general rules of thumb, but the reality is everyone varies with age, in maturity levels, plus just based on time, opportunities to participate in this. But generally, like with, Eileen is to maybe when she's in the 4th or 5th grade, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to participate in philanthropy through her school, through her church, through other organizations in the community. And a lot of times it's just a matter of getting the family involved with them to make sure that there's collaboration and communication. And then maybe when they're 10 to 15 years old, they get more involved. I'll give you an example of one we worked on last Christmas or the holidays last year. There was an 11-year-old, a different family, but a grandchild. And, they went through the whole process. They gathered the data. They decided on the charity. They sent the contribution. And then they never got a thank you. And, 5-6 months later, they're talking to the parents and they said, I don't think I'm going to gift to them next year because they really, not that you have to get a thank you, you're not doing it for the thank you, but there was just a lack of response from the charity that made them reconsider.
Wow.
So
that's
it's a
powerful.
great lesson.
Yeah, that's powerful from an 11-year-old. That's really powerful.
Yeah, and then I have kids who've been doing this for a while, and now they're in college. I call them kids. My own children tell me not to do that, but now they're in college, and I have one that's organizing a Relay for Life at the university.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then, one thing we do here with our firm is our local chamber has a great program where they call it the leadership program. And you go, I always require, or I don't require, but I recommend that everyone who joins the firm participate in this, because over a 12-week period, they go to 10 or 11 meetings, and at each meeting at the chamber brings in one nonprofit, a different nonprofit that talks about, what they're doing. And what they're trying to do is establish next generation leaders who will participate in nonprofits in the community. And at the end, when they graduate, they pick a charity that they really connect with, and then hopefully get on a board there and really get more active in it. So depending on the age, the opportunities, the time, it's just a wonderful lesson where it teaches you respect for money. It connects you to multi-generations with a lot of sharing of information.
That makes sense, and it also brings up my next question to you. I know we're going to be talking about multi-generational family meetings on the next podcast, and I am so freaking excited about that because that's near and dear to my heart. But when you have clients just sitting in front of you and you're not to that point yet, what tools do you give them that will help them to maybe make that family, multi-generational family meeting happen?
Well, one thing, when I'm in front of a client or just talking to somebody in general about it, I'll just ask a pretty basic question. In your children, grandchildren, are the younger children and grandchildren encouraged to participate in philanthropic decisions? And really, from just talking to a client, that really opens up a lot of conversation about maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe they want to, maybe they don't want to, but it creates a lot of conversation. And then at that point, a lot of times they'll say, well, this sounds great, but it seems overwhelming. Where do I start? And we have a checklist that, not a checklist, but a series of questions that they might start asking their family. And oftentimes the opportunity is over holidays, just very basic things like, what charitable activities have you been involved in? Why, how? It's the who, what, when, where, and how, and why questions. What gifts have you made recently? And just kind of opening up conversations about what they're currently doing, and then kind of moving into the possibility that we could do it in a more organized way as a family, sharing values with the process. And then the other thing we have is we have a detailed checklist and process with questionnaires for developing a family giving plan. So if it gets to the point where you're over the holidays, you're talking to your kids or grandchildren about it, and there's interest, we have a whole series of things tools you can use to just create a plan. What's the benefit to our family of doing it, or who in the family do you include? Do you extend it to son and daughter-in-laws? Do you extend it down to grandchildren? What ages? So kind of coming up with parameters in terms of how who you want to talk to and how. And the other part of it too is everyone has different stages of life, and everyone has different financial situations. So where's the money coming from? And we usually recommend that the money come from the grandparents if we're working with them, because they might have it more than maybe their kids or grandkids do. And there's some tax benefits to using your IRA required minimum withdrawals now and just rolling them over directly to charities or to, things like that. So there's some tax benefits to have them do it too versus their kids or grandkids. But really it's going through those types of questions, talking about goals and strategies. And we have a lot of tools that can help draw out the information so that they can come up with a custom plan for their specific family.
That's fantastic. And I'm just going to put my 2 cents in here. Tim, as a grandparent, we're both grandparents at this point, but our
Yes.
grandkids are very young. For those grandparents out there that are hearing this podcast that maybe have grandkids that are teenage years into early college, and you want to have this conversation with them, one of the best ways I think you can do that is most of the grandparents out here don't need Christmas gifts from their grandkids, and they know they're probably cash strapped, especially if they're in college. The gift that would mean the most to you, I'm sure, is to have some time with your grandkids. So find the charity, or you already have a charity that you love, and maybe you spend some time with, or maybe you give your time to right now, because this is before Christmas. Ask your grandkids, the only gift I want for Christmas is for you to come with me to whatever charity you're involved in and just spend a couple hours with me serving this population. What a great way to pass on that legacy, pass on why you specifically identify with this charity, why you love it. It may not be their charity, but that doesn't matter. The gift is spending time with you at the charity that you love, and that really can open that conversation.
Yeah, one last example I'll give you is that comes to mind is a family. So the grandparents created a donor-advised fund, but specifically to create scholarships for a private high school that the grandparents, the parents, and some of the grandchildren, so the parents and grandparents had attended, and some of the grandchildren were attending. And all they really asked was that family members get involved with selecting the scholarship winners. And I can't tell you how
that's awesome,
valuable that lesson is every year, and how much those kids enjoy it. And then how much time, like you said, time's the commodity, how much time they've been able to spend with their grandparents, and information and history and knowledge that they're getting. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that is awesome. I know we're drawing close to the end of our time today. What do you have for us for last thoughts?
So my last thoughts are, I think we all do a pretty good job as advisors preparing assets for transfer to the next generation. I think the biggest gap, and the reason why oftentimes wealth transfer doesn't succeed, is because of that gap between learning and education about what to do with the money when you get it, preparing the heirs and the charities to receive it. And philanthropy is such a great tool to pass on your knowledge, to educate about money, and really prepare that next generation so that they're ready for it. And we have a lot of tools and processes for that.
If you are listening to this podcast and you have your own financial advisor, I would encourage you to ask them just basically one question. If this is something that interests you, what tools or resources do you have for me when I think about passing on money to charities, to help my grandkids, to preserve my family legacy? What tools do you have for me that we can look at? If they don't have an answer for you, contact Tim, please. Find an office that does.
We're trusted fiduciary advisors for our clients, and we have a lot of resources, a lot of experience doing this. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening to the WealthStream podcast with Tim Scannell. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Tim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family, and I'm hoping you have somebody in mind for this podcast specifically and the next podcast, which is the Multigenerational Family Meeting. That's going to be an amazing podcast with a ton of great information and a glimpse into how Tim and his team work with parents and grandparents and just really help them preserve that legacy. So please do not miss that one. For everyone at the WealthStream podcast, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the WealthStream podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insight that you can apply to your life and share with others. Please don't forget to subscribe below to be notified when new episodes become available. And don't forget to live greater. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hightower Great Lakes. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Hightower Great Lakes is a group of investment professionals registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, and with Hightower Advisors, LLC, a registered investment enforcement advisor with the SEC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC.